Hey guys, welcome to a new video where I'm going to show you guys how to fetch data from a SQL Server database table and transform it and return it the output as XML. This will be a really quick video. So we're going to use this employees table that we created in the Blazor Wasm video series that we created. And I'm just going to select some data from this table, show you what's in there. Right now we have 8 records and you can see employee ID, first name, last name, age, email. You can see what fields we have in here. And so the idea is, how do we get these records, which are currently just database rows, into XML output? The way you do that is actually relatively easy in SQL Server. If you want to output this into XML, all you have to do is type for XML auto. And then if you run that, you'll see that it does give you XML. Problem with this is that if you look at this, it's giving you the XML values are coming in as attribute. And the reason why SQL Server defaults to this is because the XML output or the XML data is actually smaller if you render the values as attributes like this. But typically when we're working with XML, we're using elements. So we're going to go ahead and transform this into elements. And to do that, it's very simple. You just put a comma here and you type in elements. That's the keyword. Hit F5 again. And now if we look at the output, you just click on the result screen here. You just click on this link. It'll open up the XML file. And this is what it looks like. Now we have our entire table as XML data. But there's one important thing about this output that is a little bit, it won't work if you were trying to read from it properly because it doesn't have a root element. XML, to be well formed, has to have a root element. And you see here, each object, there's employees objects in here. There is no like main one root element that kind of surrounds all the other child elements like this. And when you're typically looking at it, kind of looks like that. You have root element and you have all the child elements within it. So we're going to output, number one, the reason why the main element for each row is coming up as employees is because our table name is employees. So we want to change this table name to just employee, this element name rather, to just employee. And we want the root element actually to be employees, because it kind of makes sense. It's a XML data dump of employees, and then each employee element is going to have the name employee. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's close this. And the way we do that, number one, so we already have the base query here. And what we're going to do is, again, put another comma. And now we're going to specify a root element. And this is how you do it. You put it in single ticks. And we're going to call this, for now, I'm just going to call it emp so I guess you guys can see what it looks like. Hit F5. And then in the result pane, I'm going to just click the first row, which is a hyperlink. Now we actually have all the employees nested within an emps or root element, which is cool, but still, it's still not giving us the names that we want. We really want the root element to be employees, and each employee element or employee record in the XML data just be employee, right? So the way to do that is you would have to alias this table name. Like if you alias this table name like this, or I'm just going to call it Nuno for now. Whatever alias I set this table name, the employee's element name will be changed to that. So if I run it, and now when we look at it, you can see the employees nodes all changed to the term Nuno. Of course, that doesn't make any sense. So let's change this and alias it as employee. Now when you run it, you get, well, first before we run it, let's actually also give it a different root name of employees, and then execute that and take a look at the XML. And now it looks proper. You have a root element of employees, and then the child elements are all start with the name employee. And I'm going to show you a couple more things here. So this is one way to get the data out of a table and output XML data, and also manipulate the root element and the table, the name of the table, the way it renders to the XML for each record. But there's also, if you want to just select from a table into an XML variable, the way you would do that, you would declare, I'm just going to call this variable data underscore XML, and I'm going to give it the type XML. Now we want to set this variable to the XML data that's down here, right? So to do that, you can actually execute another query like this and automatically set the variable to a query. So we're going to select star from employees, and similar to the way we have it up there, we're literally just going to copy this because we want to output this as XML. When you execute these kind of queries to set a variable directly from a query, you usually can only return a single value. But when we run this, you can see it returns a single column and a single value. It just gives you a big blob of XML. So this right here, this query is perfectly safe. If you weren't outputting XML and you're setting a variable name, you're setting a variable to the output of a query, you usually, just to be safe, you really want to do top one like that, just so you know, because if it returns multiple results, you'll get a SQL error. So now let's just test this. Let's select from @data_XML, and I'm gonna comment this top portion here out. Press Control K, Control C without letting go of the control button. That'll automatically comment out whatever you have highlighted. We'll hit F5 to execute this, and you see we actually get the same exact XML data. This XML data that you're seeing here, this result, is actually being pulled from our variable. Now, the question is, what if you wanted to query an XML variable, right? Like the XML from a variable, right, in SQL Server? And I'm going to show you how you can do that. So there's ways that you can directly query an XML variable. And the way you would do that is you'd do a select from whatever the name of the variable is, and then you would do .value. And then here, you would put a parenthesis and then 2 ticks. There's actually 2 parameters in here that you have to pass, and they're both strings, a text. So I'm just creating them so you can see here. The first parameter that's on this side, it's the path. So if you look at the path here, it's going to be employees. Oh, see, actually this output is wrong. You see employees and employees, that's bad. So we have to make sure we alias this, which I didn't do. So let's do that. That's the way it should be. And so that way each individual employee record, instead of being employees, it'll be employee. So here we're going to say we want to pull all employees, but we want record 1. That's what so you got to use square bracket 1 square / employee. This is basically the path to your data. And then from the employee, we want first name, and we want the first employee from that record. So we're pulling the first employees node, which there's only one because that's the root node. And then we want the first employee record, and then we want to get the first name from the employee record. And so first name is a varchar 50. So in the second parameter here, you're going to want to specify whatever data type you want this to be. Now, if we run this, you can see we output nuno, and you can alias this, by the way. You could either alias this like this, and you want to call this first name. And if you run that, now you got a column alias. Or the other way to alias, which is actually my preferred way, is to do it this way. You'll do alias equals and then whatever column you're pulling from. So if you wanted to pull from the second, if you wanted to pull the last name, all you would have to do is change the first name here into last name, and then make sure you set a proper alias. And now you see we're pulling Nuno and first name Nuno, last name Pereira. So this Nuno is the first record in the data set. So let me just run this again. So we'll order the data's in. So since we're pulling the very first record for all of these, it's pulling Nuno Pereira. But what if we wanted to pull Marco Pereira? How would you do that? Well, pretty easy. I'm going to copy this block of code and paste it. It's very similar. Obviously, the root, there's only one element, so it's always going to be 1. But in the employee element, there's multiple, 1 per row, because we're aliasing the employee's output of the XML as employee. So here, all you have to do is change this to the second record. And now when you run it, you can see this query executes first and pulls Nuno. And then the second query here, the second select statement, pulls Marco. Pretty simple, right? All right, guys, in the next step, I'm going to show you how you can pull a list of records from an XML variable or an XML column. We have here our XML variable that we just were using. To do this variable is called @data_XML, as you can see here. We're going to start off with a standard select statement, and we're going to pull from our data_XML variable. But in this case, instead of doing .values, we're going to do .nodes, and we're going to specify a path here to the actual employees that we want to pull from the XML data. Basically, it's the element path to the employee element. So what we're going to do here is going to pull from employees, and here you're not going to do a bracket 1 bracket because we're going to pull all of them. And in this case, it doesn't employees, there's only 1 because that's the root element, but we want to fetch all employee data, all the employee data. And when you pull from a XML column or XML variable this way, you have to give it an alias, and I'm going to give it item row. The name of these could be whatever you want them to be, but this is just the way it has to be alias. So now we're going to pull the specific columns that we want, and to do that, we're going to pull from item.row. These relate specifically to these aliases here, and then we're going to do a .value, and now it's kind of like the way we did before, where we have the 2 parameters in here. One is the path to the element, and the other one is the data type. So I'm just going to put in here varchar 100 for now. Keep it simple. And here, instead of actually doing a path, because we're already specifying a path in the from, we're literally just going to tell it what column to pull. So we're going to get first name. And here you do have to tell it which one you want to get. You want to get the first one for the current row. So in other words, it's going to look at the employees in the XML, pull the first employee, and then for that first employee, you want to get the first name column. There's only going to be only 1. This is the reason why they have this is if it's an array, you pull from multiple items the array. And so I'm going to put a comma here, and I'm going to copy and paste this 3 times. So we could do last name, and so we can do email. And then we're going to run this just to run a test to see if this works. And there you go. We got a list of all the users from our data_XML variable, except we don't have column names. And if we want to give them column names, very simple. You can just do first name equals, and the same thing for last name equals, and the last one, email equals. Execute that, and you're good to go. So that's how you read from a variable or a column, it could be a column in a table, to fetch one or many records. Thanks, guys. That's it for now.